This podcast details true crime cases. It contains adult themes and may contain descriptions of violence. It is not intended for children. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you for joining me for another best of episode of Once Upon a Crime. As we look back at 8 seasons of the podcast, I've chosen another case from the archives to highlight, and this episode was unique in a number of ways. First, it was a no-body murder case. It is rare that a person is charged with murder when a body has not been found. Jeanine Harms' disappearance was one case in which meticulous detective work was necessary to crack it. Another noteworthy aspect of this case is that it took place literally steps from my original podcast studio. Jeanine Harms went missing from Campbell, California, and was last seen at a well-known entertainment spot in my hometown. Another coincidence about this case is that Jeanine Harms' maiden name is Jeanine Sanchez. I am also a Sanchez. Sanchez is my mother's maiden name as well. But probably the most significant reason this case continues to resonate with me is because of the shocking twist at the very end of this tragic story. It was one that no one saw coming, and may be one of the most jaw-dropping conclusions to a true crime case that I've covered so far. Finally, I recorded the episode in a more casual way than the normally scripted narrated tales that I present. Instead, I told the story as if you and I were sitting together discussing the case face to face. I hope you enjoy this episode, Murder in My Hometown, the disappearance of Jeanine Sanchez Harms. If you'd like to listen to the entire episode, there's a link in the show notes, as well as suggestions for other episodes from Once Upon a Crime's archives that you may enjoy. This started out on Friday, July 27th, 2001. It was the middle of a hot summer here in San Jose. A woman named Jeanine Sanchez Harms, her maiden name was Sanchez, her married name was Harms. She was somewhat recently divorced. So she was single and she was going to have a night out with a friend for dinner. Now, the place where she was going to have dinner, I could literally see it from where my office is right now. It's basically right across the street. She was a little bit nervous because she had a somewhat of a blind date that same night. So she was going to meet her friend first and then basically go across the parking lot. There was another restaurant, another chain restaurant called the Rock Bottom Brewery. And that's also a chain you guys might know of. So she was supposed to meet a man named Alex Wilson there that night. She was having this dinner with her friend and she told her about that she wasn't really looking forward to this date. She had a hard time saying no to people, her friend said. So she didn't give him like a cutoff, like brush off. She just was like, yeah, I'm kind of busy. I can't do it, So he kept calling her. Finally, she agreed to meet him for a drink or dinner or something. But so she finishes her dinner with her friend Janice, says goodbye, walks across the parking lot to the brewery. And she sits in the bar waiting for him to show up. Now, okay, this guy has been calling her repeatedly, insisting that she meet him to go out. And now he's late. Now, what is that? Some kind of power play? That's just not cool. So he finally shows up 30 minutes late. But by this time, she had struck up a conversation with a whole group of people. There was men and there was a woman named Savannah Bryan. She starts talking to this group. I don't know. They just, start a conversation. Well, Savannah is there with a group of coworkers, and one of her coworkers is a 43-year-old man named Maurice Nesma. So now she's sitting with this group at their table, having drinks. Alex shows up, and he joins the group. So now everybody's drinking and socializing, and that's kind of what she wanted, because she didn't want to be alone with him, so I guess that kind of worked out for her. I don't know that he appreciated it too much, and later on we'll hear from him about what he thought. But Savannah kind of says, I have to go, and she takes off. But Jeanine stays with the group. They decided to take the party down the street to a nearby bar called Courts Lounge. Again, from where I'm sitting right now in my studio, I could walk there in about 4 minutes. Jeanine's friend Janice said, at dinner, we had a couple of drinks, or she had a couple of drinks. Then she goes over to the Rock Bottom and has some more drinks. Then she goes to the court lounge and she has some more drinks. This is over a few hours. So I'm not saying, like she's binge drinking or anything like that. But I'd imagine at that time she's a little tipsy. So what happens is she ends up getting in an argument with another patron at the bar. I'm not sure what that was about. So she decides to leave the bar. But I think that it's kind of like that time where it's still early enough where you're thinking, hey, I'm not ready for the party to end, but I want to get out of this bar. She had driven actually to the bar, the Quartz Lounge, from the Rock Bottom Brewery. She had actually driven both Alex Wilson and Maurice Nesma, which is the guy that she had just met. And Wilson is the guy she was supposed to have the date with. So they were both in her car. So this is a little weird. You got this third wheel coming along. He's in the back seat. So they leave the bar. She takes both of them back in her car because she had driven them there, drives them back to the Rock Bottom to get their cars. They all end up in the parking lot of this shopping center and pick up their cars. Now, the next series of events are a little bit sketchy. We're not exactly sure what happened. We do know that Jeanine drives home. So her house is in Los Gatos. It's about an 8 or 9 minute drive from the prune yard where they were at. So it's very close. We know that she drives home. Investigators would believe that she had possibly invited both Alex Wilson and Maurice Nesma to meet her at her house to have some more drinks. We do know that she stopped at a Jiffy Market, which is just like doors down from her house, and bought some beer. Now, she doesn't drink beer, her friends say. She's not a beer drinker. She doesn't like beer. The owner there said, he knew her. Yes, she came in. It was probably around 10:30, 11 p.m., something like that, where she came in and bought a 6-pack of beer. So it sounded like she was going to have some company over and they were going to continue drinking. And her friends believed that she would have invited whoever she was with back to the house. Now, they think that she was expecting both them and maybe more people to come. But what happens is what we find out later is that only Maurice Nesma shows up. This is, like I said, Friday night. Saturday, Sunday goes by. Monday, July 30th, Jeanine fails to show up for her job at Amdal. She had been employed there for 12 years. She never missed work without telling people, if she was sick or calling in and letting them know. So that was a big red flag. Her friend Janice had been trying to reach her, and her cell phone calls were going straight to voicemail. So she knew her cell phone was turned off, which was not, of course, like her, and she was very concerned. So Janice calls her landlady, who lives, I guess it's like the cottage was kind of semi-detached to this other place where her landlady lives. So she calls her to say, have you seen Jeanine? She said, really haven't seen her since Friday. So now her friend is very, very worried. So the landlady then calls the police, and she also calls Jeanine's parents, Jess and Georgette, and her brother Wayne also shows up at the cottage when the police show up. So they let themselves in, and the police department that is first on the case is the Los Gatos Monte Sereno Police Department. The cottage is very neat and clean, almost immaculate. Her bed has not been slept in. The clothes that she wore on Friday night, according to her friend Janice, are nowhere to be found. They're not in the house. Her purse, car keys, and cell phone are also missing. They find one shot glass in the sink and 2 credit cards of hers on the counter. But when they walk into the living room and they see some things missing, her friend Janice lets out a scream because right away she said, my heart just dropped because this, I thought, is not good. She had in her living room, in her small living room, a little 5x7 red and blue colored Persian style rug. And Jeanine loved that rug. She said that was like her little prized possession. She loved the way it looked in her room, in her living room, and it was just gone. And she's like, that is very weird and very chilling. Beyond that, there were 2 sofa cushions missing from the couch, as well as the sofa slip cover were all gone. I mean, you imagine what's in your mind immediately, right? Somebody has cleaned up this place. This is probably a crime scene. So over, the next several months, they interviewed over 200 people, people that, You may have seen her that night, from the bartenders, wait staff at places she was at, to the people that she had maybe socialized with that night. And just tons of people, neighbors, everybody. The DA was finally handed the case in January. So remember, this was in July. And at that point, 3 DAs were assigned to the case. Now, what happened was they were focusing on, like I said, the last 2 men that she had spent time with that night, which was 39-year-old Alex Wilson III and 43-year-old Maurice Xavier Nesma. So during this investigation, when they're interviewing witnesses, one thing that they heard from a neighbor of Jeanine's in the area said that he had heard a, quote, loud percussive sound near her apartment after midnight on that Friday night. Right after that, he looked outside and he saw a bald man about 40 years old driving away from her apartment. Now, later on, find out that this matches the description of Maurice Nesma. But Jeanine's case was not classified as a homicide for 6 months. They dusted her home and her car for fingerprints. They didn't find anything in the house, but on her car, on her passenger door, was Nesma's fingerprint. Now, that's how they figured out his name and who he was and able to go, contact him. Even though this right away became a story in the newspapers, on the television news, in the area, local television news, Jeanine Harms was missing. Her picture was everywhere, where she was last seen at the Rock Bottom Brewery and in the shopping center. He did not come forward. So that already was kind of a red flag for investigators later on, because they had to identify him from his fingerprint. And the reason he had fingerprints on file is that he was in the system. It was found that there was 2 criminal court records on him. So that's how they were able to find him, because this was going on for some time. She had gone missing in July of 2001. Now, in 2004, because the family kept all of this in the news, including the descriptions of everything that was missing from the home, including the rug, because of this, a woman came forward in 2004 and said she had found Jeanine's Persian rug rolled up in a dumpster at a construction site near her home. She called the police and they came out and they found this rug. The dumpster where the rug was found was a half a mile from Nesma's home.
That will do it for this bonus episode of Once Upon a Crime. Believe me, you're going to want to hear the rest of this story. Jeanine Harms' family fought to bring her accused killer to justice. But when the legal system seemed to fail them, it was too much for one family member to bear. Find out what happens next by clicking on the link in the show notes to listen to the entire episode, number 227, Murder in My Hometown, Jeanine Sanchez Harms. Or listen to this episode and all episodes of Once Upon a Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you liked the more casual way I presented this episode, you may want to consider becoming a Patreon member. I often present cases more casually in bonus episodes released to members only. Go to patreon.com/onceuponacrime to find out more and join. Once Upon a Crime is written and produced by me, Esther Sanchez Ludlow. My executive producer is Lorena Garcia. Until next time, be good to one another.